understand one of the questions that Paul and I have exchanged a couple emails, and a couple of the residents have exchanged a couple emails, that one of the concerns, particularly with the Como Pool project, but I think we could broaden it to talk about a lot of our projects, is when we get to the point in the project where we are with Como Pool right now, and actually even a little bit farther back, sometimes if there's cost issues, we have to do what's called value engineering. We have to do some of that early in the project and scale back a little bit on what the design task force talked about originally as what they thought were important components of that project. Sometimes when it gets to a place where we find soil issues or we can't do something, then we have to do these change orders, and the project gets changed a little bit. And I think there's some concern about maybe how the Como Pool project is going to finish, because it feels a little different maybe than where we started. But I think there's also a question buried in there about how does the public, or if the public should be re-engaged as we move through a project, and it would be a real challenge. I don't want to speak for Alice and Don, they have way more experience in doing this than I do. But usually when the task force is done, it's kind of tricky to get that whole group re-engaged and figure out how to keep the project moving without some of that kind of going on. So I don't know, Paul, if you felt like there's more to the question than that, and maybe I'll have Don and Alice help us with the answer.
Yeah, as the project's winding down, I've gotten a few emails meeting with District 10 representative with regards to kind of the finishing touches of the project, and in particular, there's a concrete wall faces to the east and part of it faces to the north. And from what I understand, originally the elevation that to the east and north had stone on it. The project had budget issues. They dropped that piece off instead of having the stone, which is very visible from the inside, is now going to be painted. There are berms that have been built around this. There are trees that have just been planted. There's a fence that's going up. And I don't know if it was Don or somebody from Parks and Rec just mentioned, and I agree with what was said, is we're kind of walking out of this project. This is the last few things that we're doing. Let's get them done. Let's get the paint on the wall. Let's let our landscape mature, and then let's step back and take a look at things. Because a great example of letting things mature is right on Hamlin and Midway Parkway, where they did some stormwater containment. They gutted the wood area, the woods right in there, and now it's growing up. It looks great. It's a great buffer between the Como town and the neighborhood. When it was open, sure, we got a lot of residual noise coming out of there, but now it's like it's always been. So I think that's what upset a lot of people, is they, especially people here in Lexington. I'm sure they walk out the front door and they see this big gray wall.
So do you think the question that we can help try to answer is how will the project look when it's completely finished, or is it more about how to keep the public engaged?
I think it's probably both those things. I'm sure folks heard things in the meeting, maybe in the design stages and how these things were going to look, and that might stick in their head. And they saw a rendering and they're saying, well, that's going to look great when I walk out my door and this thing's all done. And in reality, that's not the case. So I think it's a combination of, let's get the job done, let's take a look at it. I think you got to give it a season, let things mature a little bit, but also what is said or mentioned at our open public meetings, we need to be very tactful about how we approach that, so we're not misconstruing some information. I don't know if that happened. I wasn't all that involved in the process with this. Just glad to see that it's coming out in the end.
Yeah. Anything about the finishes, Don, that might?
Yeah, and I sent that email about that's the last corner that we're doing, and we're just working our way out of the site, and the berm. In fact, I went out and just looked at the berm. The berm still isn't right, but the berm is supposed to be a higher elevation than there was no berm there about a week ago. Now they've dropped some in, and they were planting trees this afternoon. The berm is still significantly lower than I feel it should be, but it's just one of those things that we just continue to work as we button the project up. But as I mentioned in the email, that it's that the perception is really, really difficult to show what a project is ultimately going to be like. We get as close as we can. If you really look at that drawing, as I said, I know there's a woman that is emailing in the community, Susan Janda, that we talked back and forth quite a bit about that. In reality, if you look at that drawing that she was looking at, there's two more buildings even on that drawing than you see out there today. There's literally 3 buildings in the approved sketch, and even that got refined down and continued refined as we went through the design, development, construction documents. And typically we don't, you can't have kind of a design by committee, or the prices would be, they would just skyrocket on these projects. And but that doesn't mean we can't stand back and in a sense say, well, you know what, I think maybe we should have done this or done that or whatever. And we could go out and fix it. So I said, let's just finish it the way we intended it to be, and then if they're still concerned, then there's still that ability, because the project went pretty good. So we may be able to find some funds to put stone on the outside of that particular corner that is the offending tall corner. You can see, I mean, we have planted really a lot of trees in that area, and in the interim, it will be, if we leave it, it will be very much like that place on Hamlin and Philly Parkway. So it's going to look, you're going to see the wall for a few years, but there is so many pine trees and balsam, fir and everything in there that thing is literally going to eventually disappear in that corner. But in the meantime, yeah, it does stick out, and I certainly agree with people that